Hi, this is National Master Dan Heisman, and we're continuing with our series of instructive videos here on YouTube. Today I'd like to talk about analysis. Analysis is the number one chess skill, and what I mean by that is that of all the different things that you can do in chess, analysis correlates the most with your playing strength. As I often write in my chess tip of the day on Twitter, at Dan Heisman, suppose you go to a tournament. You'll often see 11-year-old 1900 players beating 40-year-old 1600 players. And if you see them analyze the game afterwards, you know why the 11-year-old won. It's because chess is not mostly knowledge. Chess is mostly skill, and the number one skill is analysis. So they'll go over the game, and the 1600 player will get into some sort of losing calculation, and he'll say to the 1900 player, I didn't see that. And that's how he lost. So the ability to analyze is going to be your number one thing. Now, there is no official chess dictionary, so different authors and different instructors mean different things when they say different words. For instance, a lot of people think the word analysis refers to the entire thought process. Okay, well, you're allowed to do that. But I tend to differentiate some of the things in the thought process. And while analysis is the major part of the thought process, I don't consider it the whole thought process. For instance, I think of analysis as being the part where you sort of say, what are the candidate moves? And if I do that candidate move, what's he going to do? What's his candidate moves based on what I'm doing? What's the logical follow-up to that? So in that sense, you're using analysis to generate your analytical tree of, possibilities. On the other hand, suppose you get to the end of a tree and you say, boy, if I play A and he plays B and I play C, how good is that? What's the evaluation of the position? I don't consider the evaluation to be part of the analysis. Again, it's just semantics. You can consider it to be so or not. So I would say evaluation is taking a probably quiescent position and asking yourself, who stands better, how much better do they stand, and why? Okay, that's not part of analysis as far as I'm concerned. Now, what are you looking for in analysis? Well, the main thing you're looking for in analysis is safety. If things are not safe, then we have tactics. If things are safe, then our tactical ability has told us through analysis that the moves are safe and that we can, continue searching for which things are better, but by using our analysis and our evaluation. So we're always looking for safety, and safety is number one. The ability to calculate forced sequences we call calculation. Calculatability, calculation. Okay, so calculation is a very, very important part of analysis. It's the part of analysis where you're looking at forcing sequences, as opposed to, let's say, you say, well, if I develop my rook, what's he going to do? Well, he's going to develop his knight. That's not calculation. That's analysis. Okay, but the part of analysis that's calculation is say, if I take his knight and he takes back, that removes the guard, and maybe I can play queen takes b7 and win the pawn by removal of the guard. That's calculation, which is also part of analysis. But now you're looking at a forced sequence to see if it wins material. If the calculation of the forced sequence does win material, then it becomes a tactic. So a tactic is something you're looking for. It's a forcing sequence that wins material or checkmate. It's one of the goals of analysis is to see if there's a tactic. And if so, then you need to calculate it. These are just semantics. Okay, so let's take a random position and see if we can do some analysis and see if we can see how you get better analysis. One of the main things to do to get better analysis is to analyze with strong players. Go to your local club, pick out the best players, analyze with them. Go to tournaments after the game, analyze with your opponents. Analyzing with other people, especially good players, is the best way to improve. But there's other ways to improve your analysis, and one would be watching this video and seeing what I'm doing to analyze and seeing what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong, what you would do the same, what you might do differently. Trying to improve on your skills. A lot of skills go into analysis. There's deductive logic, there's visualization, there's pattern recognition, there's all kinds of things. There's your tactical vision. These are all things that could be part of your analysis. Okay, let's go to a recent tournament. I pulled up the library for Paris earlier this year, And there's a whole bunch of games here. We need one at random. Let's pick the temperature. Let's go to hourly weather. Let's update the weather. Okay, it's now 55. All right, so let's go back and pick up game 55. Examine Paris 1955. All right, so let's do that. EXPARIS 19 space percent 55. That's how I get it out of my ICC library. Whoops, I put an extra space in there. Didn't like that. Paris 19% 55. Okay, so we have a fairly fast game between Vachio Legrave and Fabiano Caruano, but we don't really care the speed because we're going to take some time and analyze the position. Let's pick something with some meat. Move 25 is often around the right time for something that's meaty. If it's a recapture, we'll go to move 26. So let's go through the game quickly here rather than just jumping ahead. We've got a Sicilian. That's always good for analysis. Open Sicilian, even better. Let me guess. Fabiano played Nahdorf. I can't imagine Fabiano would play Classical or Scavenigan or Dragon. So I'm saying there's a 90% chance he played Nahdorf. Let's see. Oh, he played Classical. Well, shows you how much I know. All right, so the number one move against Classical is Bishop G5, Richter Reuser. You could play Bishop C4, Sozin. You could play Bishop E2. Probably leading to like a Boleslavsky. A4. All right, so Vachio Legrave says, let's play something a little non-booky here. Now, Caruana could play A6 and play it like a Nahdorf here anyway. He could say, well, if you're going to play A4, I'm going to play it like a dragon. Let's see what he does. He plays Bishop D7, a good flexible move. A lot of times that gets ready to play knight takes d4, queen takes d4, bishop c6 to put pressure on the e4 pawn. Vachio Legrave says bishop e2. So now Caruana has lots of moves. He could play knight d4, like we just said. He could play e6. He could even play e5. I doubt he plays e5 because of knight to b5, but it's not impossible. It's all going to be book here. They're all playing fast. Queen takes. G6, so now he's going to fianchetto now that the queen's on the long diagonal. Bishop E3, Bishop G7, Queen back to D2 to get out of the line of the bishop. Castles. In some cases here, black can try to play knight G4 to try to win the bishop pair. Castle, Bishop C6, instead he decides to pressure the E-pawn. Bishop F3 guarding it and also keeping an eye on the G4 square. Black repositions the knight. White gets the rook in the game. Black gets his rook a little in the game. Notice black isn't necessarily playing rook E8 so that on bishop H6 he can play bishop H1. White's not castled queenside and throwing the kingside pawns at him. He's just playing rook E8 to develop the rook, really. All right, so bishop D4. Black's probably going to ignore him. Okay, queen to A. So just a reminder, we're trying to get to move 25 so we can analyze the position. Right now, we're just kind of seeing what the two GMs are doing here in this speed game. Okay, bishop takes G7. Of course, recapture. King takes G7. Rook AD1. White's got all his pieces in the game doing something. Black's soon going to follow suit, we assume. Get his pieces in the game. You're always going to get all your pieces in the game as soon as possible. Oh, what a surprise. Rook A, C8. Gee, how did I know to do that? Okay, so now White's thinking, you know, do I want to guard this A pawn so I can maybe play B3 and then get my knight up to D5 or something? Black has some places to put his knight. Let's see what happens. Bishop to G4, pinning the knight to the rook, asking black how he wants to handle that. Black says, I'll get out of the pin by playing rook C7. White says, let me take off that knight. He's not losing the bishop pair. Nobody's got the bishop pair right now. Decides to take with the rook. He wants to keep his bishop on that D5 square. Queen checks. King steps out of the way without weakening any pawns. B4 hitting the queen. counterattacking with e5. White goes queen c4, queen b6, b5. So black's relatively forced here. His bishop is running out of moves. He plays king to g7. So is this game over before we even got to a move because he lost his bishop? I think so. We may not have much to analyze here. Rook a b1. Yeah, Vasily just winning. All right. Well, we tried move 25, but we don't really want to analyze the position where white's up a piece. I know a lot of my people listening to the video lose games when they're up a piece, but you know, if you just follow the 6 things you're supposed to do when you're way ahead, if you haven't seen that video, I recommend the videos on, you know, how to play when you're way ahead or how to not play when you're way ahead. The 6 things you want to do when you're way ahead are think defense first. That does not mean play defensively. That just means make sure there's nothing that your opponent can do to get back in the game before you make your moves. Second would be trade pieces, not necessarily pawns. Number 3, keep it simple. Number 4, use all your pieces all the time. Number 5, avoid unnecessary time trouble. And number 6, don't worry about little things. You know, here white's got a couple isolated pawns. Doesn't matter, he's up a knight for a pawn. Okay, so let's go to the next game here. That was number 56. Let's do examine Paris 19%, 57. All right, Gary Grishik. This time we won't go through the first 24 moves. Let's just fast forward 48. That's 48 ply. Knight f4. All right, so let's count the material here. Both sides have 6 pawns. Both sides have 3 minor pieces. Okay, so it's white's move here, and we're going to analyze the position. All right, so we just did the first part of analysis, which is to count the material. White has an isolated pawn on b2. We're actually not analyzing yet. We're just evaluating. We're just trying to get a feel on what's going on. Material is even. White has the isolated pawn. Both sides have a rook on the A file. White has a semi-open C file, but the C pawn is guarded. Black's D pawn is a little bit backward. White has some outpost squares on maybe F5 or D5. Black's got similar kind of squares on D4 and F4. Neither side's queen is near the king, so that both kings are relatively safe right now. Black has just played knight f4. What does that do? It attacks the pawn on d3. White has a little bit of problems saving that pawn. He might have to play something like knight to c4. Okay, so let's start analyzing. Okay, so as we just said, black has a threat. He's threatening to take on d3 with maybe the queen or the knight. What are all the ways to make that pawn safe? Rook to a3 doesn't work. Black can simply remove the guard with rook takes a3, followed by taking on d3. You never want to count pieces that can be captured as pieces that are really guarding something, because they can be just taken away. All right, so do we have any other moves besides knight c4 that might save the pawn? If we push the pawn, that doesn't work. Can we counterattack with like knight f5 or knight d5? All right, so let's look at knight d5, threatening to trade knights and take on c7. Suppose black simply takes on d3. The bishop on c7 is guarded. Is there any reason to think that the knight on d5 is enough worthwhile? Can we remove the guard with on knight on e6? No. I don't see how knight d5 is safe. All right, what else can white do? He can't play knight e1. There's a rook in the way. He can't play rook d1. The bishop's in the way. Can he counterattack something else? Knight f5 does not hit the pawn on d6. I'm thinking more and more like putting something on c4 is what white has to do. Now, could he put a knight or a queen on c4? Let's analyze that. If he puts a knight on c4 and black plays knight takes d3, queen takes d3, can black win the knight on c4 that's pinned to the queen? And the answer looks to be no. On queen c4, if queen takes c4, White can take back with the pawn, and that would save the pawn. If queen c4, knight takes d3, then queen takes b5 wins the queen. So it looks like queen c4 is safe, and it looks like knight c4 is also safe. So am I done my analysis? No, all I've determined is that so far I've found two moves that seem to save my d3 pawn. If those are the only two and I can't do anything else, then my job for the rest of the analysis would be to analyze queen c4 and analyze knight c4 to see what black would do, to see which one is better. So let's start with knight to c4. That's the less tricky of the two. Knight to c4, we've already said that knight takes d3, queen takes d3. Doesn't work. Black's not winning the knight on c4. He could take the pawn on b2, but he's down a piece, so he's not going to do that. So knight c4, and the pawn on b2 is guarded because knight takes b2, queen takes d3, knight takes d3. So after knight c4, knight takes d3 is not possible. What would black do on knight c4? Can he add more pressure with knight d4? I could just trade that off with knight takes d4. Can he move the bishop somewhere? Not sure. Trade rooks, not a big deal. He can play rook on f to b8, but the knight on c4 is guarding b2, which is a nice thing. So far, knight to c4 looks pretty good. Looks reasonable. Let's look at queen c4. Queen c4. If black plays queen takes c4, white can't play knight takes c4 because of knight takes d3, I think, because the d6 pawn is guarded. So queen c4, queen takes c4, white would have to play d takes c4. Black could still pop his knight into d3, hitting the rook and hitting the b2 pawn. So let's look at that. Queen c4, queen takes c4, d takes c4, knight d3. If rook on f to b1, then rook takes b1, rook takes b1, knight takes b2. So white would have to reverse the move order. He'd have to play queen c4, queen takes c4, d takes c4, knight d3, rook takes a8 first. Then black would be relatively forced to play rook takes a8, and then rook to b1, guarding the pawn, or at that point he could try to just play, well, his rook's still hit on e1, so he has to play something like rook b1, but then maybe black can play rook a2 or rook b8, hitting the pawn again with a little bit of awkwardness for white. All right, so let's double check our analysis. Queen c4, queen takes c4, d takes c4, knight d3, rook takes a8, rook takes a8. See, I'm seeing what's forced. I'm doing deductive logic here and trying to figure out with my analysis, if black does that, is it safe for me? So queen c4, queen takes c4, can't take with a knight because of knight takes d3, so I have to play d takes c4. Then knight to d3, forking the rook on e1 and the pawn on b2. Can't play rook e2, the bishop's in the way. So it looks, I can't play rook e2 because the rook on a1 hangs. So rook takes a8, rook takes a8, rook b1, and then maybe rook to either a2 or b8 with some pressure. If he plays rook to b8, maybe white can just play b3 there. The bishop on d2 is guarded by the knight. But the rook on a2 would stand very well in that position. If white plays something else, he could play bishop c3. Then black can play knight d4, and I can't play knight takes d4 because when he takes back with the pawn, he's forking that bishop on c3 and the knight on e3. Let's go back to knight c4. So far, queen c4 seems to lead to some problems, and knight to c4 seems better, but we're not done yet. So knight c4. Suppose black, what can he do? If he plays knight d4, I can probably just take it. Can he get his queen to the king's side and threaten queen takes g2 mate? I don't see how his queen's going to get to the king's side very easily. He could play queen d7, queen d8, queen g5. to threaten queen takes g2 mate. We're looking at knight c4. But that's very, very slow. I'm sure white has plenty of defenses to possible mates if he plays knight c4. But that's something we have to watch out for, because if black can get his queen to the king's side with his knight on f4, it's a very, very dangerous position. This is where my tactical vision comes into play. With the white knight on c4, if black can get his queen to g6 or something, he's in good shape. Or maybe he can play knight to d4 first to remove the guard on the knight f3 and then get his queen to g5. So white moving his knights away from the king's side can be dangerous in the long run. But let's look in the short run. Knight c4. What can black do? Rook takes a1, rook takes a1, gives white the a file. That's good for white. Knight d4, white can just trade. Can white, if I play knight c4, can I get rid of that knight on f4? If I play bishop takes f4, you can just play knight takes f4. Maybe in some cases I can play king h2 to guard the h3 pawn, and then play g3 and force the knight to move. That's probably a good idea. So I'm starting to round into form by thinking that knight c4 is a little better than queen c4. Excuse me. So what did I do here? Well, the first thing I did in my analysis was I noticed that he's attacking d3 twice and it's only guarded once. I then looked for all the ways that I could play safe moves. I considered a capture like rook takes a8. I looked at counterattacks like knight d5, knight f5. And I came to the conclusion that I was probably just going to have to either guard the pawn or block his queen's attack on the pawn on the diagonal by putting a piece on c4 so that the knight and the queen weren't both attacking d3 anymore. Then I realized that there were multiple ways to do that. I realized that queen c4 and knight c4 were both moves. Then I had to check to see if queen c4 and knight c4 were both safe. And then it appeared that knight queen c4 and knight c4 were both safe. Then I had to say, all right, well, now that queen c4 and knight c4 are both safe, I have to analyze a little further and see what black might do to see which one he's getting more pressure on, which one gives white the better game. And I finally decided that it looked like knight c4 gave white less problems than queen c4. And at that point, I was pretty much done. I decided that knight c4 was my number one candidate move. I had already determined that it was safe. I didn't need to do a safety check. You know, if you don't trust your safety analysis, you can recheck knight c4 and again look at moves like knight d4 and knight takes d3 to make sure that they're safe. But I went through that sequence where I had to take step by step in my analysis to get to the point where I decided not only what are my safe moves, but then if I have multiple safe moves, what would happen after those safe moves to determine which one would give me the better position. And I think I found that knight c4 was easier to play than queen c4. Now, of course, the computer doesn't care what's easy to play. He just cares what's objectively best because he doesn't care how hard a position is to play as long as there's one line that's good for him. In that sense, what the computer recommends is not always what a human should play. If the computer recommends a line that's really, really difficult for a human to play, there might be another line that's almost as good that's very easy to play. Okay, so let's see what Geary did. My guess is that even in a blitz game, Geary did pretty much what I did in the last 10 minutes, but he probably did it a lot faster than what I did, and he probably did it, of course, quietly. And I'm guessing in a few seconds he played knight c4. So let's take a look at two things. One is, what did Geary play? And two, how much time? Keep in mind he has a 3-second increment. So he plays knight c4, which is what I predicted would be the best move. And he took 8 seconds plus 3. He took 11 seconds to kind of figure that out. Did he do as much analysis as I did? Probably not, but he got far enough in a few seconds to realize what I did. And let's ask the computer now if our analysis is correct. We'll turn on the analysis button here. We'll start Stockfish 10. And he says that queen c4 is not even that good. Right now, he's got queen c4 not even in the top 5 moves. So I didn't like queen c4, but I thought it might be safe. He says either trade rooks and then play knight c4, or just play knight c4 right away. I thought trading rooks first to give him the file was unnecessary, so therefore I said just play knight c4. Stockfish is looking further and says, if trading rooks gives him the file, not much difference, 6/100ths of a pawn right now. But he doesn't like queen c4. He says if you play queen c4, of course black can just play queen takes b2. The line I was analyzing with queen c4 is also good for black, but not as good as just giving up the pawn. So I was a little bit silly, and then my analysis didn't point out right away that queen c4 is, I said I thought it might be safe, and actually that's almost a beginner mistake, that it's not. But you know, when you're doing a video and you're not paying as much attention as you would in a regular game, sometimes you make those mistakes. But if I had decided that queen c4 was safer, I would have looked at it more and then realized, what am I thinking? Queen takes b2. The fact that my final move was knight c4 meant that I didn't have to do that as much. So I don't want to make excuses, but I think there's a good chance that if queen c4 was my final move, I would have realized, wait a second, I can't play that. You always pay more attention to the move that you're actually going to play, because that's the move that your opponent's going to see in the game. That's the move he's going to try to beat. The moves that you reject, you need to spend time on to see how good they are, but not as much time as the move you actually play. That's the one that has the test, because that's the one your opponent will only see. So I wrote a novice nook once called Spend Time on the Move Chosen, and that's a very important concept, which is no matter what's going on the board, the move that you're actually going to play is the one that you really need to make sure it's safe and the one you need to take the most time on. And here that was knight c4, and it was safe and it was the best move. So I won't give myself an A for my analysis because I didn't say that queen takes b2 was the best move for black after queen c4, but I did find the best move for the right reasons. So that's good too. So I'll give myself a B, take off a grade for my one analytical mistake. Okay, so hopefully today's video all about analysis will help you. That's the one skill you want to work on. Work on it, work on it, work on it. Analyze with people. Play slow games slowly. You won't get better at analysis by playing a bunch of 10 and 15-minute games on the internet. You just don't have the time to really learn analytical skills because every move is so fast. Take your time, play slower games, and get out there to clubs and tournaments. Analyze with people, and that's how you get to be a better player. Okay, for YouTube, this is Dan Heisman. We'll see you next time. If you like the channel, please subscribe. Thanks. Bye.